What common gaps do you see in their accounting and financial practices? And then what are some steps leaders of these companies can take to actually get a better picture of their financial health?
A lot of companies early on, they'll hire a bookkeeper, consultant, or somebody at a lower level to do their accounting. And, it's really a cost center. And as they grow, they start to feel the pain points of that person maybe doesn't have this level of sophistication needed, of not having good visibility into the cash flows of their business, not having good understanding construction and engineering of, on a project by project basis, how profitable are we? WIP reporting is huge in the construction space, and that really gives you an understanding.
Did you know that many construction firms don't actually know if they're profitable until it's too late? In this episode of the AEC AI and Tech Strategy Podcast, we'll be joined by Jason Kruger, partner at Citrin Cooperman, who will share how data-driven financial strategies can transform the way AEC firms operate. We'll also talk about the hidden pitfalls in accounting processes, why outsourced financing can be a game changer for growing firms, and the early signs of fraud that every engineering leader should recognize. If you're looking to build a more profitable, transparent, and resilient business, this is one episode you will not want to miss. But before we jump in, I wanted to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event, built for project managers who want to improve project delivery, communication, and leadership through practical sessions and tools. These events provide an avenue to connect with leading PMs in the industry. Visit aecpmconnect.com and register today. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Jason Kruger. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Glad to be on.
Absolutely. And I think, Jason, you've definitely got a unique perspective, compared to I'd say the persona of the typical guests we have on the show. So I'm excited to kind of dig in more, and we'll get kicked off with, your background. So can you share a little bit about your background and the path that led to your current role as partner at Citrin Cooperman?
Yeah, so my background is really focused in the finance and accounting, area. Started my career with one of the big, in the big four accounting space. So Deloitte, large national global firm. My focus at the time was in financial statement audit. So working with companies that were either public companies that needed audited financial statements, or companies that had requirements for audits related to banking requirements, because they had financing with banks that required an audit, or maybe their executive team or their investors maybe required it. But then from there, in 2008, I left after about 10 years, and I started a company called Signature Analytics. And so what we did at Signature Analytics was really work with and support the small mid-market companies from really zero, but sweet spots 10 million to 100 million in revenue, and support their internal accounting and finance function of their business. A lot of businesses in that space don't have the sophistication, don't have the right team in place. They're not getting good visibility into their financial information. They're not leveraging technology appropriately to get good information efficiently. And we can manage and drive that, fill in the gaps, support their existing team. Built that business up to about 75 employees full-time. And then we were acquired in November of 2024 by Citrin Cooperman. And that we fit nicely into what they call their BPO group, Business Process Outsourcing Group. Services are the same. Citrin Cooperman's a national firm that provides all types of accounting, tax, and other advisory services. And this was a nice fit within their group that they had. And so I'm a partner in our BPO practice within Citrin Cooperman now.
Excellent. And this is, kind of what I alluded to, right? Because you guys and your previous business, right, use of technology to help firms better understand kind of where they're at financially, right? So, and
Yep.
we see this a lot. You hear from peers like construction and engineering firms struggle to get accurate financial insights due to a variety of factors, which I'm sure you can speak to. So what common gaps do you see in their accounting and financial practices? And then what are some steps leaders of these companies can take to actually get a better picture of their financial health?
Yeah, a lot of companies early on, they'll hire a bookkeeper, maybe they'll use a consultant or somebody at a lower level to do their accounting. And, it's really a cost center. They have to incur the cost to have somebody to do the books, invoice, make payments, close the books maybe, make sure they get the information to the tax provider at the end of the year. And as they grow, they start to feel the pain points of, that person maybe doesn't have this level of sophistication needed when they get to a certain level. So they start feeling pain points of not having good visibility into the cash flows of their business, not having good understanding in construction and engineering, on a project by project basis. How profitable are we? WIP reporting is huge in the construction space. And that really gives you an understanding of the profitability, where you are on jobs, how complete you are on jobs, to ensure that you're meeting, that you can effectively manage the jobs appropriately. And if you don't have that information, you're kind of running on gut feel. And so as companies get more sophisticated, the team needs to get more sophisticated. And so that's where, we come in, and, most companies, when they start off, are on QuickBooks or some form of QuickBooks. And so there's some quick wins we can do to streamline how they leverage QuickBooks to get better information. There's some technology that we have that integrates with QuickBooks to drive better reporting. That can be, if it's set up appropriately, can drive, real-time reporting, so that businesses can see what they really need to make decisions. And then as they progress outside of QuickBooks or beyond QuickBooks, potentially, there's different ERP systems that they may be considering. And so all of that, then that technology is then leveraged to, at the end of the day, transition the accounting and finance function from a cost center to a value driver. Because if you have good visibility into your numbers, you then can make decisions to improve those numbers over time. If you're at a certain profitability percentage or gross margin percentage, if you have the numbers, you can say, okay, now what can we do to improve that? And you can measure that. And, every percentage point above and beyond where you're at is bottom line profitability. It's more profitability that you can now reinvest back into the business for growth. So all of those things are things that we're working with our clients on to support them as they grow.
Excellent. And I know, especially when that is not the strength or the background of an engineer or construction leader, right, it can seem a little bit foreign, because for many, their trade before they started the business was either doing engineering or running crews, and maybe not, let's say, accounting, CFO, controller type background. So,
Yep.
You can't do everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that all the time, and as a, having started a business myself, it's the same thing. I had a background in finance and accounting. That was my trade. That was my understanding. And then as I grew and as we grew the company, I started to have to really understand. I don't have to be an expert in sales and marketing. I don't have to be an expert in some of the other areas, but I definitely need to understand it. And one of the things that I see that doesn't work very well is when business owners start their business, they say, hey, I'm good. I'm good in my space. I'm good at my trade. I'm good at, the product or service that I sell. And I'll just hire a bookkeeper and they'll take care of the accounting. And then I'll just hire a salesperson and they'll take care of sales. What ends up happening is, if without the appropriate oversight and leadership of those individuals and structure, they end up failing or things go sideways. And so that's where the business owner, I find, has to step in and learn it enough to provide that leadership as the company grows, and also make sure they have the experts driving that to be successful. And that's where we come in too, is we own the accounting and finance function. We bring in the ownership, bring in management, so that they're educated enough to be able to understand and make decisions on the numbers, but we own the success of that so that they can focus on, the areas that they are most valuable in as well.
Which rolls right into our next question, Jason. So,
strong project outcomes need skilled managers and competent leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
If you're a firm and you're trying to scale, you recognize this is an area of need. How can outsourced financial services help these leaders make better decisions while still, like you said, being educated and still having that sense of control?
Yeah. Well, I think in a couple areas. One is we want to make sure we have the right people doing the right thing. And so, I see it's a lot of companies say, well, we need to hire a CFO. It's like, okay, well, what is your, how do you define the role of the CFO? The CFO should really be focused on the strategic side of the business. If that CFO is also closing the books, in some cases, invoicing, paying bills, you're either overpaying for a CFO or you've hired somebody that doesn't really have the skill set of a true CFO. And so where we can come in is really provide that leadership at that CFO level, the controller level, but only in the level of hours or the time that's needed. So we can break that up, and you only need a CFO for, let's call it 10 hours a month. You only need a controller for 40 hours a month. We can then provide support of the existing team. And so the model is fantastic in that it's flexible, it's scalable. We align the cost structure with the business so that they're getting value for the cost at that they're paying for it. But really, it's making sure they have the right level of sophistication and experience in the areas where they really truly want to see value.
Which, I mean, I think is reassuring, because if you don't need that person full time, I think that's got to be a nice weight off the shoulders of any leader or company.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of companies, they lack that financial and accounting leadership, but that, if you hire a CFO, that's expensive. A good CFO is going to easily be over $200,000. A good controller is going to easily be, probably 150 or more these days. And so they don't really need to hire or pay that for their business, because they need the resources. They need the skill set of that controller for 40 hours a month, not 160. And what ends up happening is now they try to put that person into multiple roles, and now that person's doing lower level work. So they're paying that person, a high rate to do lower level work. And then they're trying to ask them to do these higher level sophisticated things that maybe they don't have experience on. And so we would like to break it up and make sure they have the complete team in place that's consistent and there's a continuity. And then also making sure that, everybody's supported effectively and the communication lines are there.
Excellent. And, and then speaking of actually kind of knowing what you're getting or knowing what you're paying for or knowing what you already have in place. So what defines an efficient accounting process? And then how can these firm leaders understand if their current system is actually working for them, or maybe if there's room for improvement?
Yeah. So on a technology side, if you're currently cutting manual checks, you're not efficient, right? There's so many more ways to process payment of bills through leveraging technology and streamlining different technology platforms. That's kind of the basics. Same thing with the invoicing process even. There's ways to streamline that. So when you talk about the day-to-day accounting side of a business, there's absolutely ways to streamline. But from an overall efficiency and good practices, the number one thing is make sure you have good processes and efficiency in the day-to-day, but make sure you have consistency in how you close the books every single month. And you have processes to ensure that you have confidence in those numbers. It's accurate, it's relevant, it's timely, and then ultimately you're getting good deliverables or reporting out of that. So if you're just getting a printout from QuickBooks, you're getting one set of data that you might be able to make some decisions off of. But if you're getting a deeper level of reporting that breaks down into project by project reporting, profitability, what's happening, on a, if you're a product business or if you're a service business, or, how profitable you are on each client, what's working, what's not, really digging into the margins of your business to define how you can become more profitable. Same thing on the expense structure, making sure that every, expense associated with your business is driving value to your business over a period of time.
All right. So Jason, when it comes to finance, money, you see it on the news all the time: phishing scam, cybersecurity, just fraud in general, right? People trying to take money away from a business through illicit means. So what are some early signs of fraud that engineering and construction leaders should watch for? And then how can they strengthen their internal controls to mitigate against it?
Yeah, I think the biggest, the most obvious sign I see is if the company has hired one individual to manage all of accounting. They say, hey, you know what? I hired a bookkeeper, I hired an accountant, and they do everything. And then they give them access to paying bills, and they give them access to the bank account. They give them access for, invoicing, collections, and deposits and everything. And then they put their full trust in that person. And everybody seems nice, but at the end of the day, when you put too much, if you entice somebody too much, even somebody that has maybe good intentions up front, they start to justify why maybe they deserve to be paid more, or why they deserve, something from the company that really they don't deserve or they shouldn't be having. And so we see that a lot is when you have one person that you entrust and there's no oversight. There's not even any oversight by the business ownership or management team. If you do have one person, I think, having somebody else provide oversight or creating checks and balances is critical, meaning that one person should not have access to sign checks. They should not have access to maybe the bank account. They can do all the accounting without having direct access. They can have read-only access to the bank account, so they can record all the transactions, but they can't make transfers of funds. They can't write checks. They can't do those types of things. So creating a second level of controls over the management of cash is critical, and getting the management team involved in that. Meeting on a regular basis to talk through the financial performance and really understanding what's going through your expenses is important. And then the other thing that we've seen, quite honestly, is manipulation of the payroll. This one person might also be processing payroll and have full control over payroll. We've seen individuals that just said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to give myself a raise because there's no HR. There's nobody that is involved with the company that controls, they onboard every employee, they have full control, and they gave themselves a raise and they justified it, through various means. And so, that's where having either somebody internally have checks and balances as it relates to the payroll process, reviewing the payroll journal on a regular basis, the onboarding of employees, and then also as it relates to the flow of cash through the business, ensuring that there's second set of approval anytime that there's cash flows moving in and out of the business. And quite honestly, that's where our services come in, is we provide that absolute control. We make sure there's segregation of duties, there's oversight and review of everything that's being done. We're an outside provider. We ensure that there's right access for each of the individuals. So, I don't think that I've seen a situation where any of our clients we've had a situation where there has been fraud with any of our clients because of the controls that we put in place.
Which for the engineering audience, at least in structural engineering, it's the same concept, redundancy, right? You have more than one way to transfer load just in case something doesn't go as planned, right? So in the case of what you're speaking to, Jason, checks and balances and redundancy to make sure that, fraud is mitigated as much as possible. And it sounds like to me, like what you see more of is more internal than external. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, we do see some situations where there's phishing. They get an email, hey, this is the CEO. Can you transfer funds to this bank account, right? And to be honest, we laugh about it, but it happens and they're good and it looks real and funds are transferred. And so there's also got to be processes in place within the company that if you get an email like that if it's, a certain size, you need to physically call that person back and confirm with them, or send a separate email, not reply to that email, but send a separate email to confirm, hey, I got an email from you, about transferring funds for a specific purpose. Did you, just want to confirm that this is the case? And so when one person has too much control, they get that email. They now have control to make the transfer without any second approval associated with it. And those funds then are gone and they're tough to get back. And so, unfortunately, we've seen that before as well. In most cases, or actually, I think in all cases, it's a situation where, we came in after the fact, unfortunately, because now the company is having some challenges and they realize that they didn't have the controls that they needed in place.
And I think most people are familiar with the concept of two-factor authentication, right? That you try to log into your bank account and you get a text message. So this is exactly the same thing, except your 2FA is not a code. It's reaching out to a person. Walk over to their desk, give them a call, send them an email. Don't reply all, of course, right?
Right.
But it's the same idea. And from the couple of cybersecurity experts we've actually had on the show, it's actually one of the most effective ways to keep your business safe from a cyber perspective. So it doesn't surprise me that it also works out in the financial realm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Two-factor authentication. So obviously, when you're talking about technology, it's making sure that you have the appropriate security in place and you have the right, I'm a big proponent of working with a managed service provider on the IT space to ensure that, you are looking at your systems and your security of your systems on a consistent basis and testing them, frequently to ensure that you have something, you have confidence in that. And, to be honest, we had a client yesterday that their outside IT firm, they use an ERP system called Great Plains. There was some unusual activity that they saw over the holiday weekend, and they reached out. They actually shut the system down immediately, which caused some short-term pain and suffering for the team and the company. But, it's to reduce any sort of risk moving forward. And now they're testing it to ensure that it's ready to be, repositioned and brought back online live. So those are types of things that we've seen that can really mitigate some of that risk.
Absolutely. And Jason, again, it has been a pleasure to speak with you and discuss a topic that I think is important no matter the type of business that you're in, but that I don't think all leaders get as much detail about. So one final piece of advice that you'd like to share with AEC firm leaders who want to improve their financial decision-making, build more resilient businesses, and overall improve financial health, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I mentioned before is, knowing all aspects of your business is critical. The importance of every aspect of your business. Yes, you want to provide a good product and or service, but, the sales function ties into, the sales and marketing function tie in to the business as a whole, the HR function, and then the finance and accounting, and really to take that next step of growth and profitability beyond where you're at requires a higher level of sophistication and infrastructure within all areas of your business to ensure that you get there. And the finance function, is so critical as that relates to managing and understanding cash flows, but then also, so you have understanding of, hey, how's my business operate from that perspective, but then also the visibility into the financials to make decisions to improve the performance of your business. Without that, I've seen companies just continue to spin and spin and spin and not be able to take that next step.
Gotcha. And again, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience wants to connect with you, maybe find out more information on any of the topics we discussed today, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm always, it's very easy to find me on LinkedIn. Jason Kruger. I'm at Citrin Cooperman. I'm always happy to talk to business owners. Shoot me an email, the letter J, Kruger. That's JKRUGER at citrincooperman.com. And Citrin is CITRIN, Cooperman.com. And just love to talk to business owners. And if I can help, that's great. If I can't, I usually know somebody I can introduce them to.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your engineering and technology endeavors.